I'm live à, thầy講啊。start 咗。Yeah, hi, Siti Amina. Okay. Yeah, hi, Siti Amina. Okay. Yeah, hi, Siti Amina. Okay. I don't know why, something wrong with the live chat. I mean, I can't see it here on mine, but I can see it on my phone, but it's fine. So, let me try it on my phone. Mm, Shenzhen, hi. Hey, I want to ask those who are in, can you hear me? Can you hear my voice? I can't seem to see the chat on my screen, but I can see it on my phone. So I want to know, can you hear my voice? Can you hear my voice? Okay, okay. Let's wait for the rest to come in. We are still early, so I will wait for a while. Renee, you're asking me for the individual assignment. Um, where can we choose the ethical theories from, right? The ethical theories are all those that I have taught you, all the normative theories, whether it's ethical egoism, utilitarianism, Kantian ethics, prima facie duty, the virtue ethics, libertarianism, Rawls theory, all, all that I have taught you so far. So you must learn how to apply it into the moral issue. Okay, Renee? You try it and see. If you're not sure, you can WhatsApp me and ask. So I will give you my WhatsApp number again. So you try and apply some of the normative theories that I have taught so far in this semester. In fact, I have covered all. Today I'm concluding the second part of CSR. So you try and apply all the theories. Of course, the CSR you can also apply it in if you are dealing with a company. Individual has no CSR because CSR stands for corporate social responsibility, right? We're talking about a corporation. So CSR, the application of whether it's a narrow or broad view, your subject matter should be concerning the company. So it's not applicable if you're talking about individuals. Okay, I shall start today's discussion. Today we are talking about we are in week 4. So the question is increasing profit the only social responsibility of business? This is week 4. Last week, week 3, we say yes because we were arguing the narrow view of CSR, and we based this on understanding by Milton Friedman. So we covered the article and then we study the doctrine of the invisible hand. We say that these assume people are acting out of self-interest and they believe in very low level of government intervention, a libertarian approach, allow people to do what they want with their life, allow the corporation to maximize their self-interest, and without intending so, society become better off because of the doctrine of the invisible hand. This is supported by the theory of utilitarianism. Okay, so this week we are saying that no, the increasing profit is not the only social responsibility of business. So, so when we talk about CSR, we are saying that the firm has some level of responsibility towards society. So we are asking the question: to what extent is this responsibility towards society? Right? To what extent is this responsibility? Is it a very broad, or is it a very narrow type of responsibility? So last week we argued for the narrow view of CSR. We say this is also known as the economic view, championed by Milton Friedman. In your Padlet, I have also included one article by Good Pastor. Let me show you on Padlet. It is over here. Let me see. It's down here. Week. We are in week. We are in week 4. Okay, week 4. is increasing profit the only social responsibility business? No. So this article I mentioned about is by Good Pastel. Good Pastel. There, this article. So I'm talking about this. Jonathan asked me for a recap later. Let me finish my today's tutorial first. Today's tutorial is quite heavy. So I'm referring to this article. So when I'm talking about Good Pastel, so Good Pastel call this type of narrow view of CSR as strategic stakeholder theory. Strategic stakeholder theory. What does it mean? It tells the same thing as Milton Friedman's argument. Other stakeholders may have potential to affect the overarching goal of optimizing shareholder interests. So the overarching goal is still maximizing shareholders' interest, you see, maximizing profit for shareholder. The overarching goal is still there, but other stakeholders may have an influence in determining this overarching goal. Okay, so they, meaning the management of the company are no, sorry, they are meaning the other stakeholders are taken into account in decision making by the management of the firm. So when the management of the firm make decision, they take those into account. But the overarching goal is still to maximize shareholders' interest. So it's just not saying that other people are not important. They're important, but not as important as the shareholders' interest. So it is still a narrow view of CSR, but this is called a strategic stakeholder theory. Okay. So as we all know already by now, if you have followed me in the last week tutorial, Milton Friedman argued for a sole responsibility to maximize profit while playing within the rule of the game. While playing within the playing within the rules of the game. This is because the social consequences, I should say the positive social consequences, without intending so, right? There is no intention to have this positive social consequence, but it's just a byproduct, it's an outcome, without intention to do so, of the invisible hand doctrine. So if you remember the positive ripple effect into society, so if the company is allowed to maximize its profit, the consequence will be society will be better off because of this invisible hand. We're working on the invisible hand. This argument will say that by doing so, this is the sole social responsibility of the company. But here today we are trying to argue there are sets of argument. Thanks for the name and idea. I will take note. So today's argument is to say that no, that is not the sole responsibility of the company. Increasing profit is not the only responsibility of the business. Why? Let's look at the argument. So this is also known as the broad view of CSR. I have given you a video by Edward Freeman. If you look at your Padlet, you scroll a bit to the right hand side. Can you see this is actually Edward Freeman? This is the original Edward Freeman. He argues for a broad view of CSR. And in this argument, he is talking about shared purpose or shared values. Similarly, in recent years, we see the same argument being proposed by Michael Porter and Kramer. More recently, 2011, and they talk about creating shared values. I have already done this in my pre-recorded video. If you look at the pre-recorded video, so I have part 1 and part 2. So if you look at part 1 and part 2, you will get an idea of what this shared value is about. I'm not going to repeat. Instead, I'm going to elaborate a little bit more detail. Because it's already pre-recorded, you should go and take a look. So I'm going to give you slightly more depth to what I already taught you. So Similarly, in Good Pastor's argument article, he called this the multi-fiduciary stakeholder theory. Multi-fiduciary stakeholder theory, as opposed to just now he was saying that the strategic stakeholder theory. Strategic stakeholder theory is still the narrow view, focused on the shareholders, but taking into some consideration other stakeholders as well. But predominantly, the overarching goal is still to optimize shareholders' interest. But here, when you adopt a multi-fiduciary stakeholder theory, you are saying that you are giving the same priority as the shareholders to all the other stakeholders. Same level. It's not a ranking like earlier on, where the shareholders has a priority and the rest all at the bottom. Here, you are saying at the same level, same priority. In decision making by management team, which involves some economic trade-off, meaning there will be some compromise involved in this model. Excuse me. So, according to Good Pastor, in 1991, in that article I shown you just now, he said whether management team pursue a strategic, which is the narrow view, or a multi-fiduciary stakeholder approach, which is the broad view, both will result in a paradox. A paradox. Either way, they have done something wrong, according to Good Pastor. Why? He said because it seems unethical just to privilege shareholders. It seems like it is wrong, morally wrong, just to look after shareholders' interests. At the same time, assigning same privilege to all the other stakeholders seems to violate the management fiduciary duty towards the shareholders. Can you see that? This way is wrong, that way is also wrong. That's why he says there is a paradox. I won't tell you how Good Pastor resolved this issue. You need to read a little bit about in that article. What he is trying to say is that fiduciary duty in this case are not same at the same level. Some are more important. This seems to me the kind of argument that puts Good Pastor is trying to propose to resolve this paradox is using a prima facie duty in resolving this kind of paradox. But anyway, you can go and find out yourself. But for today, I want to show you the John Orlando argument against. He is arguing against the narrow view. He is arguing against the narrow view. Here, John Orlando in Shaw and Berry's textbook, page 190. Let me show you where it is located. So if you look at Shaw and Berry, it is here. This is page 190. This is the Shaw and Berry moral issue in business. Can you remember? Let me show you quickly. Let me show you the cover. This is the cover. It's the cover. Okay, this book is actually in your palette. If you go to your palette, you go all the way down to the bottom, scroll to the left-hand side. Can you see this textbook called Moral Issue in Business? Okay, go and download this and turn to page 190. Let me scroll it back to 190. Oops, somewhere here. And now I'm on page 198, so it's somewhere near. So 190. Now, this article is not about narrow view or broad view. This article is about the ethics of corporate downsizing. And in this argument about downsizing, right, which I'm not going to cover in detail, I'm not going to cover actually this topic, maybe next semester, I don't know. So, in this argument, John Orlando has 5 arguments why there is no moral basis, there is no philosophical basis to prioritize or to privilege shareholders over other stakeholders. The other stakeholders in this case, we are talking about employees, workers. Okay, so let me show you how Orlando argued the case. Orlando says there are actually 5 reasons here why there is no basis to privilege the shareholders, or sometimes known as the stockholders. So he says, argues that there is no moral basis to privilege the shareholders only. Number 1, property rights. When we talk about property rights, those in the narrow view will say, like who support focusing on shareholder alone, right? They will argue that shareholders have property right. As a result of this property right, they deserve the shareholders deserve or are entitled to the profit derived from the property. Okay, I invest money in your company. As a result, I hold a certain share. I own this property right to a certain share in your company. Whatever profit gain, I have this right to my profit, right? So for John Orlando, he says that, yeah, no doubt you own a property, but this property is for generating profit, for the purpose of generating profit. It does not mean that this entail no obligation at all to those people who are linked to your property. For example, he gave this example of if you own a property like apartment and you rent it out to some party, the property is yours, of course, but you derive rental payment from the person who renting your apartment, right? But you also have an obligation to ensure that this property is safe for those who are tenant in your property, you see. It doesn't mean that you have no obligation at all. So he says, but shareholders owning property entails obligation as well to other parties linked to that property. So there is some obligation owed by the shareholders towards those people, other stakeholders that is linked to that property, the company itself. So the other stakeholders we are talking about the employees lah. Imagine employees as one stakeholder, right? So why do you privilege the shareholders and forget about the employees, forget about supplier, forget about your customer and so on, right? Okay, so the employee represent the other stakeholders that you need to be considered to consider about, to take into consideration. That is number one. The second argument is fiduciary duty. Early on, we already said that the management of the organization owes some fiduciary duty, a duty to act in good faith on behalf of the shareholders. So many define the moral superiority of shareholders on ground that corporate managers are bound by a fiduciary duty to their shareholders. And that kind of fiduciary duty trumps any competing duties. This duty is more important. This is just like the strategic stakeholder view of a good pastor, isn't it? This kind of fiduciary duty trumps all other duties. Now, the counter argument offered by Orlando is like this: but the evidence show that fiduciary duty of a corporate manager has been historically justified as the means to protect the honor from the manager, meaning they are trying to ensure that the manager don't use this right or use their action to only advance their self-interest. You see, manager has some authority, but they should not use this authority to maximize their self-interest. They're trying to protect the shareholders from the manager of using their authority for their self-interest, stealing money, cheating others, bluffing the shareholders, serving their self-interest. You see, it is not that is not allow managers to advance their own interests against those of the shareholders. Managers are supposed to represent the shareholders to maximize their interest, not to serve the manager's own self-interest. You see, so it is not the case that this manager cannot serve other interests. So therefore, taking into account other stakeholders' interests does not conflict with managers' fiduciary duty to shareholders. There is no conflict. So when the manager make decision, taking into account all the other stakeholders, there is no violation of fiduciary duty because this manager is not acting out of self-interest. You see, he's acting on the interest for the good of the organization. It is not acting against the shareholders for self-interest. So this is an argument that says the interpretation of fiduciary duty is wrong. John Orlando said this is the right way to interpret what is fiduciary duty. The third argument offered by John Orlando is this. Because the narrow view perspective, there are people who argue the case that shareholders, because they invest money into buying some share in your company, there is a risk of losing money. You see, there's a risk involved. So therefore, risk involved, therefore duty of care owed. there is a duty of care by the management to make sure that to mitigate this risk involved. But however, right, there are two buts here. No, there's a one but and there's another but here. Number one, but the argument here by Orlando, he is trying to say that, but this risk, right, don't imagine that it is something that is very risky. The risk, in fact, is very low because usually the shareholders, when they invest money into a company, they don't invest their whole life saving into one single company. Usually, they will invest in a portfolio or they invest in some form of a trust, unit trust, where the trust will invest in the portfolio of different companies in different industry. So this risk is very diversified, and in any case, the shareholders can sell away to mitigate, to remove this risk. If they think that this company is a bit risky, they can actually get rid of the share easily. Just sell it, just make a phone call and sell it, right? So the risk is actually very low for Orlando's perspective. And furthermore, he says, but look at the risk taken by the employees. In fact, the employee that you want to downsize, that you want to ignore when you are maximizing profit, for example, keeping their salary very low, right? For example, he says, but this employee is at the mercy of the company. You see, when an employee come to a company and work, they draw a salary. After a while, based on this salary, right, they will start to buy a house, spend money on the children education, and they start to have build roots and form friendship in this community, you see. So to ask them to easily move and get to another location, right? If you make a decision that is not favorable to this employee, right, to find another job, for example, it's actually not so easy to handle. The risk involved is so much higher. If let's say, for example, the employee lose a job, the risk is so much higher for the employee. So can you see that the risk element, when you compare it from the shareholders' perspective and other stakeholders, actually the other stakeholders is more risky. So in this argument, it means that you should actually look at the interest of the other stakeholders where the risk is higher, not only the shareholders. You have no reason to privilege just the shareholders. Okay, furthermore, the argument by those on the narrow view, they will say that the duty towards the shareholders, there is a contractual duty because this manager has been hired based on a contract by the shareholders, by the board of directors, who is appointed by the shareholders. Of course, these directors will also be shareholders as well. So they actually have a contract with appointing different managers in the company. There is a contractual obligation, and here it says shareholders invest capital, expect profit, and there is a contract here between the management that owes a duty towards the shareholders. At the same time, there is a contract between the shareholders and the company itself. The shareholders, when they buy a share, they expect in contractual terms some kind of a return, isn't it? Some kind of return. And they expect profit from the company as well. So workers also work for fixed wages. So you look at the contractual obligation. So the worker has a contractual obligation. The shareholders has a contractual obligation. The management of the firm has a contractual obligation. Fulfill the contractual obligation. That's the argument. So the argument by Orlando says like this, but if you think that the shareholders are the owner of the firm because of this contractual obligation, I enter into a contract, I own your company, a certain share in your company, therefore I'm entitled for the capital based on this contract. I entitled to the profit based on this contract. But he says this is not true because shareholders do not consider themselves just investors. While shareholders can easily sell their shares, workers cannot easily change their job. This is quite similar to the risk, right? But he's looking at the dimension of the contract. While shareholders can easily sell their shares, workers cannot easily change job. Not equally free or mobile. Furthermore, more care should be given when considering matters related to workers. Employees themselves have contractual right with the firm as well. And the expectation is that as long as they perform their duties well, they have a job. So why do we have to look at the contractual obligation of the management towards the shareholder. What about the contractual obligation towards the employee? Are we not also there to fulfill this contractual obligation? Okay, so it must be of some equal ground. Cannot be privileging just the shareholders' contractual obligation only. And furthermore, these other people's money is the argument that the management of the firm, when they use this money to do different things, whether to help different stakeholders like the community, the employees, and so on, right? Actually, these are not their money. Can you remember the Milton Friedman's argument? This money is not their money. They cannot easily dispose. When you dispose of this money for different CSR purposes, to help the employee, to help the supplier, to help the community, and so on, right? It's actually a form of taxation, is it? It's a form of taxation. So the argument is that, but shareholders do not expect profit maximization. Okay, so if you think that this money is the shareholders' money, so what John Orlando did is he actually went to interview and do a survey with shareholders. What do you expect the management of the firm that you invest in do with this kind of a profit that they generate? They understand this profit cannot be solely the profit of the shareholders, because if you don't take care of your customer, if you don't take care of your supplier, if you don't take care of your employee, will you have a company tomorrow? Can you see that? Now, if you start exploiting your workers, if you don't pay your suppliers, if you don't give a good service, a good product, and good after-sales service to your consumer, do you think you will have a business in the future? You see, the shareholders doesn't think about only my self-interest for maximizing profit. They know this. They know that in order to maximize profit, they have to do all these things, you see. So furthermore, if shareholders are serious against such taxation, meaning taking the money to invest into all these different stakeholders, right? It's a form of taxation or stealing. Can you remember? We were saying that taking money that is rightfully the shareholders and you do all this CSR thing is a form of taxation or stealing. He says, if actually, in fact, the shareholders are not happy with all this, right, they can easily, with a phone call, remove their money from the company. You see, I don't want my money to be taxed or stolen. I just sell my share. My share price is still the same. So they can easily sell their share, whereas any decision not favorable to employees cannot be easily addressed by resigning, as securing another job takes time. So there's no such mitigating option for other stakeholders, where the shareholders very easy, they can mitigate this denial of allowing the management of the firm to steal the money or to tax them. So in this 5 argument, Orlando says that there is no moral or philosophical basis to privilege shareholders' interests, and he suggests to us that we should also look into various stakeholders as being equally same level as the shareholders. No reason to privilege the shareholders as a priority. So Orlando's 5 argument will give you some basis to support the stakeholder view that challenge the argument presented by the shareholder view. Okay, so now I have done the argument for the broad view of CSR. Now I want to open to any question that you want to ask me. Any question you want to ask me? I can't see your chat here, but I can see on my phone all your chat information, so I can still get it. Now I want to ask you first. Tell me, do you have any question you want to ask me? Do you have any question you want to ask me regarding just now what I have just shared with you? Do you have any question you want to ask me? I will wait for a while. So meaning I have taken about 25 minutes to share with you this argument here for the broad view of CSR. This is the same as the multi-fiduciary stakeholders theory, and also this is also the same as Michael Porter and Kramer's creating shared values, or what Edward Freeman originally called the broad view or the stakeholder view of CSR. Any question you want to ask me about CSR, this broad view of CSR? Any question you want to ask me? I will wait for a while I look for a table, a diagram here. Anyone want to ask me any question? Samuel, you can use whatever what I've taught you in your assignment. But the question is not whether you can or you cannot use. The question is whether you are applying it correctly into your assignment or not. Okay, you can, but you must apply it correctly. Okay, Samuel. Okay, any more question? Well, wait for a while. You can. As I said just now, Samuel, CSR has to do with company. Individual does not have CSR. Because can you understand that CSR stands for corporate social responsibility? Corporate. So an individual is not a corporation. So we are talking about a company here. Does the company own some responsibility to society? And if yes, what kind of responsibility owed? To what extent is this responsibility owed? What is the scope of this responsibility? So that's the dispute, you see. So is it a very narrow, focusing on shareholders, or is it very broad, taking into account all the different stakeholders? So what is the nature of this responsibility owed, if there is anything owed? Okay, just to conclude, so I want to address Jonathan Liu. You asked me a quick recap. Here is a quick recap. Look at this diagram here. Recap of all the normative theories. Descriptive theories describe how a person mature in terms of moral thinking, reasoning. This is a Kohlberg's model. And normative theories are theories that allows you to make a decision what is right and what is wrong. So when you say that this is unethical, but on what basis do you make the judgment that this is unethical, for example, right? Now, the basis will be the application of some normative theory. There must be some theory that you apply or assume. Most people don't apply that. They assume because they don't know the theory, you see. They just think that it is right. But there's an assumption that this theory is applying, you see. Applying in this case, but you don't know about it. It is assumed, you see. But we cannot assume. We have to know on what basis we are making a judgment, you see. So when students say, "Hey, this am I arguing that some reason to support why this is ethical or unethical?" So if you say that some reason to support why this is unethical, you already pass the judgment why it is unethical. Can you see that? Can you see when you name something as unethical, it's already unethical. What do you mean? So there must be some reason or some theory that you already apply in to come to this judgment that this is unethical, you see. Okay, so normative theories will allow you to decide what is right and wrong. So relativism would be the case that everything is relative. This one we already debunked. We say it's not possible. It's self-defeating. It contradicts itself. Absolutism would be there is an objective standard to what is right and wrong. The question is, how do we ascertain what is exactly right, and what is exactly wrong? There are two broad approaches. One is from the action, from what you do. The other is from who you are, you see. Can you see that? How do we know what is right and wrong? Absolutely. We know it from what we do. We know it from who we are, you see. From what we do, how do we make a judgment? Again, there are two forms. One form is to look at the consequences. Look at what you do. Check the outcome. If the outcome maximizes self-interest, that's the right thing to do. This is ethical egoism. If the outcome maximizes interest of everyone, the greatest number of people, that is utilitarianism. Parochialism is just a mid form where it favors the group, but this is also self-defeating. Self-defeating. Doesn't matter. You are only learning ethical egoism and utilitarianism. The other form of what you do to determine what is right and wrong, as look at the action itself. What do you do? What is the action itself, right? What are you doing? The action itself, there are two theories here. Again, Kantianism will say that based on the action that can be universalized, you see, depends on reason. How do you universalize the principle of an action? Can it be accepted by all rational men? He says that there is an absolute right and absolute wrong, and this is unqualified, meaning that once an action is right at all times to all people in all circumstances, regardless of the consequences. This is unqualified absolutism. There's only one right, and it's always right. How you decide it? You decide by using reason. As a rational man, can this be generalized? Or as a rational man, do you want to be treated as end in yourself? Prima facie duty will say that there is a form of hierarchy, ranking, grading in terms of what is absolutely right. And this kind of ranking will shift. You have to check which one is most necessary, most incumbent. This is the prima facie duty that you should perform first. And finally, ethics of being, looking at your character. We talk about virtue ethics. What would a virtuous man do? Would a virtuous man tend to do this as a habit? That is how you understand all the normative theory. Oh, by the way, of course, distributive justice, I just covered this last week lecture. Go back and take a look. Oh, is it this week? This week lecture, yeah. Just go back and take a look. Again, what is the right way to distribute wealth and burden in society? How to distribute benefits and burden in society? Utilitarian will try and say that as fair as possible, as even as possible to maximize utility using the marginal utility curve, but not too much. Some form of practical redistribution, but not absolute form. Rawls will say distribute in a way that will maximize benefit to the least advantage in society. And who are the least advantaged? You have to put yourself in a original position behind the veil of ignorance. You will want to maximize the minimum situation that you may be in. The minimum situation would entail you to understand that this group of people are the least advantaged in society. Of course, the difference principle will apply. Will say that inequality is acceptable if the least advantage is better off. Utilitarianism will say that distribution will be just, will be fair if you obey people's property right. Allow people to live the life they want. If I have this property, if I have justly transferred it to you, it is your property now. The money is now in my hand. So how property is being exchanged depends on how people respect each other's individual liberty, each other's property right. Okay? So I have recapped how you apply, how the normative theory works. I'm only telling you the surface. There are quite a lot of material that you need to read to know about. And I'm quite surprised, many of you who WhatsApp me to tell me what you are doing for your assignment. Most of you get the right, the approach is right. You understand correctly when you apply the theory, some argument. Okay, I just want to make another point here. Can you see when I discuss Orlando's view, right? I have given you two sides. Shareholders have property right. Shareholders are entitled to profit derived from the property. But shareholders owning property entails also obligation. Doesn't mean that I have a right to everything and then no one has other right. Can you see I'm giving you one side of the argument and then I'm giving you another side of the argument. There are two views. It's just like what you do in your assignment. Point 3, what is one side of the argument. Point 4, what is another side of the argument. Can you see that? So you're supposed to do that throughout. So even in the final written exam, I will always do that as well for the final exam. So I will expect the student to say, okay, these are some of the points supporting. These are the counter points that is opposing, you see. Then you will stand back and say, okay, which side do I think is stronger? Is it this side or is it that side? If this side is stronger, I will explain why. And then I will explain why did I reject this side, why I think it's weaker, you see. So you always have this idea of two opposing views, and two sides also have their own sets of argument. Some will apply theory, some will apply argument, some will apply research. Similarly, some will apply theory, argument, and research. You stand back and say, okay, this side is stronger, or this side is stronger, and then explain why you reject the other side. Okay, this is called critical thinking, critical argument. Okay, now I'm done. If you have questions, just text me on either through WhatsApp or in this sharing here in YouTube Live, and I will answer you. If you do not have a question, then what will happen is let's wait for the 1 p.m. group tutorial 8 to come in. I will start at 1:05 p.m. What I will do is I will repeat what I have taught you now, so that the tutorial group 8 will also have a chance to interact with me lah. So to be fair to the tutorial group 8, otherwise the tutorial group 8 will always be looking at my pre-recorded video. They have no chance to interact with me. So if you have any further issue, just WhatsApp me. Don't call me. 358-3043. Sorry, 358. So if you still have any issue, don't call me. Come, Gucci. Since you don't have any issue, so I will show you my. Okay, say hello. Say hello. You want to say hello? Gucci, say. Say hello to everyone. Or you say bye-bye to everyone. Okay. Sleepy. Eat and sleep every day. You know how to apply Kantian ethics? Do you know Kantian ethics? Or you prefer ethical egoism? Eat, sleep. I know you are an ethical egoist. Eat, sleep, grow fat. Eat, sleep, grow fat. Eat, sleep, and grow fat. Okay, bye. Okay, guys. We will wait for the second group to come in. You may leave if you are busy. You may leave. It's all right. So I will leave this YouTube live streaming until 1:05. Then I will continue with repeating this tutorial for the second group. So if you still want to take a look at this tutorial, you may do so through the recorded session, which I will post in my Padlet as usual. I will post in the Padlet, which is at the bottom. So I try and keep everything in the same place. So in the bottom here, it will be here live session for today. Okay. Okay, thank you guys. Shenjin, thank you. Shinjin, is it? Shinjin, thank you. By the way, next week there is no lecture, right? Remember, next week there's no lecture. And the following week we will be week 6. We will do what's the topic again? Week 6. We shall be doing bribery. Yeah, bribery. Yeah, we will be applying all the normative theory on bribery. Okay. Okay, thank you guys. You may leave now. Some of you left, Thank you. Let's wait for another 5 more minutes. We shall start at 1:05. Now it's 1 o'clock. So another 5 more minutes before we start. Okay, thank you for informing me your name and ID. So how are y'all? Hi, how are you coping? Um, with the MCO, it seems like I've been hearing news that it seems like the lockdown will be until after the Hari Raya. If it is after Hari Raya, then most likely they will allow us back to the campus. Um, if that is the case, I still doubt they will allow us to have our lecture face to face, because our lecture face to face will be involving 200, 300 students at one time. So that would be too big a number there. I don't think they will allow big gathering even after the MCO. So most likely we will have to cope with teaching online for this whole semester, because the issue is not resolved. Although they have managed to flatten the curve and then reduce the number of patients with active COVID-19. It seems those coming back from Indonesia, those coming back from overseas, again bringing in the infection. And some of these local strand of the virus seems to be mutating, and some of these strands seems to be more infectious than others. So there is still a concern there. So we have not reached a stage where we can say that it is safe to move around. Although now they relax the MCO a bit, I suppose that at one point then they will still need to allow people to go back to work, about allow business to operate. But the idea of social distancing still need to be enforced. I'm just telling you something that's in my mind so that I buy some time, wait for the rest to come in. I think quite a lot of you are in already. I'm surprised those who are in at 1 o'clock are more than those at 12 o'clock. So I have a feeling that even without the MCO, social distancing policy will still be in place, and our big classes will meet. Unlikely we will face each other face to face for this semester. I think it is a right decision, you know. Um, and because looking at the rate where finding a vaccine, developing a vaccine is concerned, mm, I anticipate, this is my own opinion, right? My own judgment on this issue. I anticipate the August semester will be online as well. I'm fine with that. I mean, I have no issue with that. In fact, I find it favorable for me because I already developed so much material online. Those things that I've taught you, right, can be used again. uh, yeah, Nicole, for next semester. For next semester, I think most likely, from my judgment, my own opinion as well. Yeah, of course, that's what I'm trying to say, Nicole. So it seems to me next semester, the August semester, it is still not safe to move around like previously. So we are not back to normal, you know. We cannot be back to normal. I already know this long ago, because all the news talking about vaccine. You know that the only way for us to be back to normal is where we have an effective vaccine. Number one. Number two, this vaccine is widely available, meaning anyone who wants a vaccine will get it. Will be able to get it. So for these two things to happen, right? Number one, you need to come up with the vaccine. And the vaccine, from all the sources I've read, right, the earliest, the most early one is 9 months, but unlikely, it's most likely going to be 12 months to 18 months. So assuming the worst case scenario, 18 months, right? 18 months from January, lah. Let's assuming it's from January this year, right? So we are talking about June next year, okay? By June next year, we will get the vaccine, assuming, Nicole, I'm just thinking out loud, I may be wrong. I mean, it's just my own personal judgment, right? I'm not giving you this as from an expert point of view. Um, so the idea is that the by mid June you get a vaccine. That is the point where you get a vaccine. You need to now make it in mass production to make it available worldwide. Imagine, assuming half the population in the world require this vaccine, right? You're talking about 3.5 billion of this vaccine going out. It's not so easy, Nicole. But Nicole, your degree, right, makes no difference because it has no impact negatively on your degree. It has a positive impact if you are borderline and your result is very good. Can you see that? Actually, the kind of policy they have in place for during this lockdown, this MCO, is favorable to student. If your given your certain average that you have, if your score is very high, it's favorable to you, you will be moved up the next level. You see, in terms of your honors level, your degree level. Um, if not, right, if it's not favorable, meaning you just pass, it makes no negative impact on you. You see, it won't change your overall average. So Nicole, it is not bad for you. It will only contribute positively. Okay, I think my time is up. I want to start for today's tutorial. Today's tutorial, let me open my Word document. Today's tutorial, we are concerned about week 4, right? We are concerned about, is increasing profit the only social responsibility for business? Last week we discussed and we said that yes, it is the only social responsibility, and the person who championed this last week, right? The person who championed this, can you remember? If you follow my tutorial closely, you will know. It's Milton Friedman. Can you see Milton Friedman? Okay. So this week we are going to say that no, it is not the only social responsibility, and we are going to investigate some argument on this. Let me prepare myself here. Okay. So CSR has to do with the question of whether firm has some responsibility towards society. If we say yes, and then we will ask the question, to what extent is this responsibility? What is the scope of this responsibility? For the narrow view, where the proponent will hold the shareholder view of CSR, the narrow view, or also known as the economic view of CSR, the idea is that the only responsibility is to maximize profit for the shareholders. So if you look at the argument presented by Goodpaster is this guy here on, let me show you, okay, on Padlet here. And you see this article, if you click on, right, look at the author's name, it's loading, just give me a minute. Kenneth Goodpaster, okay? This is the article I'm referring to. Goodpaster said that he called this the strategic stakeholder theory. Strategic stakeholder theory. He says other stakeholders may have potential to affect the overarching goal of optimizing shareholders' interests. The idea is that we have to still optimize the overarching goal of shareholders' interest. There's only this main interest. All the other interests, all the other stakeholders, their potential interests may have an effect on the decision making, but not the most important. Okay, so the other stakeholders are taken into account in decision making by the management of the firm, but in this decision making of the firm, the overarching goal is to optimize shareholders' interest. So the focus is still on the shareholders, although they have taken some concern about other stakeholders. So this is called the strategic stakeholder view, also known as the narrow view, economic view of CSR, or the shareholder view of CSR. So of course, last week we have studied Milton Friedman. So he argued for a sole responsibility to maximize profit while playing within the rule of the game, because by doing so, right, there are positive social consequences as a result of the invisible hand doctrine. And this is not without purpose intention. It's not without their intention that they want something positive for society. Although without this intention, can you see that there is a positive ripple effect in society? So this is the argument by Milton Friedman. Okay. So today we are trying to explore the other point of view that says no. So increasing social responsibility, increasing profit is not the only social responsibility of business. There are other responsibility as well. So this is called the broad view of CSR, championed initially by this author called Edward Freeman. So if you look at the Padlet here, let me go out, and if you scroll to the far right, can you see this guy with beard? So like grizzly bear. So this is Edward Freeman. This is Edward Freeman. So Edward Freeman championed a broad view, also known as a stakeholder view of CSR. And in this article, Creating Shared Value by Michael Porter and Kramer, I have actually shared this in part 1 and part 2 of tutorial 3 regarding these shared values, how you, based on this document here, how you focus on shared values where all the stakeholders are concerned, which I'm not going to repeat because I'm going to develop slightly deeper some aspect of the argument there. So for Goodpaster's point of view, he called this the multi-fiduciary stakeholder theory. The management of the firm owes multiple fiduciary duty to other stakeholders. So other stakeholders have the same priority as the shareholder, the same level playing field as the shareholders. So in the decision making by the management team, which involves some kind of economic trade-off, because you cannot please everyone, you see. So there'll be some form of compromise because you come to the table to agree on shared values. So Goodpaster 1991, his argument is that whether the management pursue a strategic, which is a narrow view, or a multi-fiduciary stakeholders approach, both will result in a paradox. Both will end up doing something wrong. Why? Because it seems unethical just to privilege shareholders, meaning the narrow view, it seems that if something is wrong, it's unethical in all decision. So this is adopting the strategic stakeholder theory, right? At the same time, when you assign same privilege to all stakeholders, you cut the management team away from their fiduciary duty. You are actually violating this fiduciary duty owed towards the shareholders, you see. So either way, if you only focus on the shareholders, it seems like you are doing something unethical because you ignore all other stakeholders. But if you look at all the stakeholders, it seems that you have violated your fiduciary duty towards your shareholders. So either way you turn, you have done something unethical, you see, according to Goodpaster 1991. But in his article, right, in his article here, he is, I won't tell you his final conclusion. He is giving a resolution how to resolve this paradox at the very end. If you were to read the conclusion part where he arrived at an argument that says we still need to honor this fiduciary duty, you have to give credit to Milton Friedman on how he argued the case. But at the same time, we cannot say that we ignore all the other duties owed. But these other duties owed to other stakeholders, right? These are not fiduciary duty, not at the same level. This comes some kind of a graded ranking involved. So not the same as not as incumbent as a fiduciary duty. This is his argument, how he try and resolve this issue. For today's session, I'm trying to show you how John Orlando support the broad view of CSR, and he brings to the table 5 sets of argument. One on property right, second one on fiduciary duty, Third one, assessing risk, who has more risk. Number four, looking at contractual obligation, which contractual obligation important, and the idea of the management of the company, is the management of the company handling other people's money, just like what Newton is arguing. So John Orlando's argument comes from the Shaw and Barry textbook, page 190. So if you were to look at the textbook that I've given you, if you have a chance to look at it here, this one, the brown color one, this main textbook that I've given you. If you go to page 190, you go to page 190, this is the article. This article by John Orlando, he argues for the idea that there is no basis, there's no moral basis to privilege the shareholders. The management of the firm must also look at other stakeholders in making corporate decision. The corporate decision he is concerned about is actually corporate downsizing. So he says the management of the firm need to consider other stakeholders, for example, the employees. He giving you the employees as the other stakeholders. Why must the management of the firm privilege, give a priority to the shareholders as number one? Why? He says there's no moral basis to do so. So here are the arguments. So you can read the detail in the Shaw and Barry textbook. Here I'm giving you the gist of the argument. So Orlando argues that there is no moral basis to privilege the shareholders. Only the prima facie duty is not absolute. Your fiduciary duty is not absolute. Managers' fiduciary duties to shareholders is not absolute. There is a duty instead to all stakeholders. So in this case, right, in consideration here is the employees as the other stakeholders. So we are talking about employees here in Orlando's analysis, you see. So why do you favor shareholders? Why do you ignore your employees? Employees are the other. It can be easily your supplier, your consumer, the society, other stakeholders, right? So okay, let's look at the argument presented by John Orlando. Okay, number one, property right. So from the narrow point of view, shareholders have property rights. So because shareholders own this property, shareholders are entitled to the profit derived from this property, the owning of certain shares in your company, in that company. But the counter argument offered by Orlando is this, but shareholders owning certain property also entail some obligation as well to other parties. These other parties, especially when they are linked directly to the property. So here, if you imagine you own a property, for example, a condominium, and you rent it out to some tenant pay you some rental, right? You say that it's my property, this rental income is mine, full stop. I have no other obligation. What about if your property, this apartment is not safe to be lived in? If there's no electricity, there's no water, there's a big hole on the ground that you can fall all the way down to the ground floor, for example, not safe. So this argument is that owning this property also entails some obligation. So you cannot say that there is no obligation or just because you own this property and full stop. The second argument goes like this. As usual, we always argue that the management of the firm, because they are employed, they are hired, they are appointed by the shareholders, and therefore there is some fiduciary duty owed towards the shareholders to act in good faith, on behalf of the shareholders. So many defend the moral superiority of shareholders on ground that the corporate managers are bound by a fiduciary duty to the shareholders. Okay, and that this duty trumps any competing duties. This duty is most incumbent, most important. But the argument here is like this. From Orlando's perspective, he says that the evidence shows that this fiduciary duty of the corporate manager has been historically justified as a means to protect the owner from the manager, you see, because they are worried that the manager will abuse their power to serve their self-interest. They are saying that the managers must act in good faith towards the shareholders, not to use money, their power, their resources for my own benefit as a manager to serve my self-interest, right? So it is not to allow managers to advance their own interests against those of the shareholders. So there is no conflict of interest, there is no conflict of duty if the manager take into consideration when they make decision other stakeholder interest, you see. So it is not a conflict of duty. So therefore, taking into account other stakeholders' interest does not conflict with managers' fiduciary duty to the shareholders. The fiduciary duty historically is meant to protect the shareholders from abuse of power by managers, not a conflict of duty with other obligation. It is not the case. So what Orlando is trying to do is he is trying to say that the interpretation of fiduciary duty by those in the narrow view of CSR is wrong. This is the right way to interpret what is fiduciary duty. The third argument offered by John Orlando has to do with risk. Who invests money in the company, that person has more risk. You see, the argument. But the counter argument offered by Orlando says this. As a shareholders, your kind of risk is very diversified. So normally a shareholder do not invest their whole life saving, all their asset and property into one share, you see, one company share. They will invest into a portfolio of shares in diversified industry so that they mitigate this risk involved. So the risk suffered or experienced by the shareholders, in fact, are very nominal. But if you look at the risk, when you make decision against the interest of the employee, the risk faced by the employees is even higher than those risks faced by shareholders. You see, so it says here, employees are at the mercy of the company, because when they start work after a while in the company, they start to take this salary that they have, they buy a car, they send their child for education, they buy a house, they invest in some other assets, and then they want to spend the money on some other assets, right? So if any decision that put at jeopardy this source of income, you will find that the employee is experiencing higher level of risk than the shareholders. Because the shareholders' risk is very diversified, the employee risk is dependent on one source of income, and they have to bear the consequence of mismanagement by the management, the consequence of mismanagement by the management of the company. If the management of the company mismanage this company, and we say, oh sorry, we need to look after the company's interest, look after the shareholders' interest, we need to downsize, for example, make this decision, right? I'm looking only after the interest of the shareholders. You are actually putting your employees at a very high risk. So there is no basis in this argument of the risk to say that shareholders has more risk, therefore you owe them more duty. That's not the case. The fourth argument has to look at contractual obligation. Number one, the argument is that shareholders has a contract with the company. I invest this money, I expect some form of return. Number two, there's a contract between the management and the shareholders. My duty is to perform in good faith towards the shareholders. There's a contract involved. So I do certain work, I get my salary and so on. Equally so, the employee also has a contractual obligation, right? So, but the argument by Orlando says this, yeah, there are some contractual obligation, yeah, but this assumption that the shareholders are owner are not true. Shareholders does not consider themselves as just investor. While shareholders can easily sell their shares, worker cannot easily change their job. This is equally the same argument as a risk factor, right? You see the contract with the employee actually has more obligation than the contract between the company and the shareholders. It says here, furthermore, more care should be given when considering matter related to employee. Employee themselves have contractual rights with the firm, and the expectation is that as long as they perform their duty well, they are supposed to have a job. So when decisions are made regarding contractual obligation, but the contractual obligation owed towards the employee should be more or same level as those contractual obligation owed towards the shareholder. So the argument using contract does not allow you to say that you should privilege the shareholders over other stakeholders. The final argument here says that when the management make decision regarding money of the firm, and this money is actually not the manager's one. This money are actually other people's money, the shareholders' money. So if you act against the interest of the shareholders, it is a form of taxation, you see, a form of taxation or a form of stealing, stealing some profit from your shareholders. The counter argument is like this, but shareholders do not expect profit maximization without considering interest of other stakeholders. Now, look at this. So the argument is this. If you are taking other people's money to do some CSR, to take care of the employee, take care of the supplier, take care of the environment, take care of the society, right? The argument is that you are actually stealing or taxing profit that is rightfully the shareholders. That is not right. That's not right. It is other people's money. But when Orlando did his survey and interview with shareholders understand. If you do not take care of your employees, if you do not take care of your supplier, you don't pay your supplier on time. If you do not take care of your consumer, you don't take care of the environment, tomorrow you may not have a business, you see. Your employee may want to leave and go elsewhere to work. Your customer won't come back to you. Your supplier won't supply you things. Can you see that if you don't take care of all these party, right, you're taking care only the interest of the shareholders, you think that you are actually increasing profit for the shareholders, you will end up not having a business eventually. You cannot be sustainable, you see. So the shareholders are smart. They know that they need to take care of your consumer, your employees, your supplier, your bankers, and so on. So shareholders do not expect profit maximization without considering interests of others stakeholders. Since managers are agents, there is no basis for only maximizing the interest of the shareholders, you see, because they should be acting on behalf of the shareholders, right? Furthermore, if shareholders are serious against such kind of a taxation, if I'm someone who say that no, you should only maximize my profit, then your company is not doing so, right? What should I do? Take a phone call, sell the share. You see, you can mitigate your you save your money. You don't allow your money to be taxed in that manner, in being stolen, right? So easy for you to do so. Whereas any decision not favorable to the employees cannot be easily addressed by resigning and securing another job. So this kind of concern for other stakeholders should, at the very least, be at the same level playing field with that of the shareholders. So on the basis of this five argument, Orlando will say that there is no moral or philosophical basis to privilege shareholder interest. If you privilege shareholder interest, you say that all the other people's interests are less important. I look after this one first. All the rest are secondary. So Orlando's five argument would be an argument that would support a stakeholder view of CSR. Okay. Now I would like to stop for a while. I would like to ask you, do you have any question you want to ask me regarding the argument supporting the stakeholder view? If you have the time, Orlando's article is very interesting to read. His article addressed this privilege to shareholders which support the narrow view. He addressed this. So the five arguments are here. You see, property right, fiduciary duties, risk, contract, and other people's money. I didn't cover legitimate expectation, but it's fine. You can, on your own free time, you also cover. This article is quite good. It's an argument against whether downsizing is ethical or unethical. In fact, downsizing is a very current topic, very trendy now, because of the COVID-19, the MCO. A lot of companies are facing a pressure to downsize. So the question is whether is it ethical or unethical. So this downsizing issue is actually very trendy, very timely. But I'm not covering it this semester. Maybe next semester. I don't know. maybe we do assignment for next semester because I can bring easily a case, any case in Malaysia. There are so many cases of downsizing. Some are retrenched, some early retirement, some put hiring on hold, so they wait for people to resign. Once you resign, they just don't hire anymore. Okay, Zainal, can you upload this document on Padlet? Okay, Zainal, the article is actually on Padlet. If you go to your Padlet, go to week 4, right? Week 4 here. So if you scroll all the way to the right hand side, you will see this article here. Week 4 tutorial, broad view of CSR. If you open it, right? Yeah, it looks like this. It's actually the same as what I have shown you now. It's just that while I'm teaching the first class just now and now the second class, I type a little bit. I just amend it a little bit. I type as I teach. So I added 1 or 2 notes, but it's the same one. It's the same as this one that I have on my. You see, I just highlight some. I just bold it and so on. It's just the same. Okay, and then underline. So if you look at that document and this document, they are the same. Okay, Zainal. So the narrow view supports CSR and the broad view does not. How can, Zainal? It's wrong. Zainal, that's not the right idea. I said, to what extent is this responsibility, right, Zainal? The narrow view, right? It's talking about CSR based on maximizing profit for the shareholders. That's why it's called a shareholders view. If you maximize profit for shareholders, the argument is that society become better off. And last week we already said this argument has some strength and some weaknesses, and we cover those weaknesses. Go back and look at the video, Zainal. Uh, uh, and now today we are saying that yes, there is a responsibility beyond just maximizing profit. And there's no reason, according to John Orlando, that you should privilege only the shareholders in maximizing profit. You should also take into consideration all the other stakeholders. So meaning the broad view support a multi-fiduciary stakeholder theory, or also known as creating shared values. Can you see the terms are the same? Stakeholder view, broad view, creating shared value, or multi-fiduciary stakeholder theory, they are talking about the same thing. So they are similarly concerned to say that take into consideration all the stakeholders. There's no basis for taking care just the shareholder. Okay, any other question that you want to ask me? Okay, Zainal? You must keep pace with me, because I have already covered quite a lot of ground. If you don't keep pace with me, you will not understand what I have covered, and then you'll be quite lost. As I said, business ethics is a subject that cannot be crammed by in the last minute. Last minute, you cannot go and just let me memorize all the normative theories. You can't do that. It is too much of material for you to understand in by cramming for exam. It's impossible, in fact. If you want to memorize and just warm it out, right, there's no way you can memorize and warm it out, because you have to apply the normative theory into different situation which I will present to you in an exam. So it can be a case of, for example, bribery. It can be a case, for example, pollution. It can be a case, for example, whistleblowing. It can be a case about corporate downsizing. It can be a case about advertising. So you must know how to apply it in, right? So even looking at your individual assignment, you can see that we are talking about corporate culture. You can apply your normative theory in. We're talking about career, can be a moral issue. You apply the normative theory in. And we talk about things like your relationship with your boss. Should you hate your boss or not? So you apply some normative theory. Can you see that there are a lot of moral issue in business where you will need to know how to apply these normative theories, different normative theories. Or let me give you another comment. I'll give you all another comment about CSR. CSR is only applicable when we are talking about a company, a firm, because you're talking about corporate, you see, corporate social responsibility. We are not talking about individual social responsibility. That is different. That's different. So CSR is talking about a company. So you cannot apply CSR to a person. Me, does Rodney have CSR? No. Oh, what do you mean? It is illogical. Okay. Any question? Anyone? Okay. If you do not have a question, I would like to remind you next week. Let me see. Can you see? Next week is week 5, isn't it? Week 5 topic on CSR we already covered. We already covered in week 3 and week 4 tutorial. There's no lecture for CSR. There's no lecture. When we come back in week 6 for our lecture, we will address bribery. I will do a full-blown application of different normative theories, all the normative theories that you have learned so far. All the normative theories as far as possible, I will apply in to this bribery case and show you how to come about the decision. So it is a good way to learn how to apply different normative theories into this case. In fact, I have done this application of normative theories in our this week lecture. This week lecture, if you look back at the pre-recorded, the live session that was recorded, right? This week was week 4, isn't it? Can you remember week 4? Okay, week 4 is up here. In week 4, there's this article called smoking, illegal cigarettes, the smuggling of a cigarette. And in this article, because one of the students asked me to consider this article, teach how do we apply the different normative theory based on this article, right? It's taking a while to load. And if you, oh, my internet slow, is it? If you look at this article, at the bottom of this article, you will find the different views based on which normative theory you are subscribing to, in line to argue on this issue of whether smoking is right or wrong. You see, a bit slow. I can't show you, but too bad. I can't show you. I think my internet must be slow. Okay, sorry, I can't show you. Try again. Last time, if I can't show you, never mind. I'm just trying to tell you. Look at the past video last week. This week lecture. Look at my discussion on smoking. You will find that I did apply all the normative theory with regard to smoking. So here, can you see that? What would the utilitarian think? Bentham's view of smoking. What would the libertarian think? Robert Nozick's view about entitlement theory, libertarian theory. What would the Kantian think? If you believe in Kant's ethic, right, you apply into smoking. What do you view? What's your view about smoking? What would the Rawlsian think? Rawlsian would be someone who believes that prima facie duty by William D. Rawls is something that is applicable in this case. So you want to apply in and see what's the conclusion. And what would the virtue ethicist, or you are an Aristotelian ethicist, you believe that you can apply into smoking and you come to a decision, you see. So my question to you, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, who are you? Are you someone who is a Benthamite, a Nozickian, a Kantian, a Rawlsian, or are you an Aristotelian? So depending on what kind of normative theory you subscribe to, you think that this theory is actually more profound, more relevant, it corresponds to truth. You think that this is something that is a stronger argument, the normative theory. Then you will apply it. Say, okay, I will do this. This is the right thing to do. You know. So look back at the pre-recorded live session to this week. You see how I apply into this case. So this is another example of how. Of course, this is smoking. Smoking is not exclusively a business moral issue, you see. But it just demonstrate to you how normative theory can be applied into different scenario. So I'm trying to bring out the point to you that you cannot just cram for learning business ethics. You need to start slowly, accumulate your knowledge over time, learn to apply, ask me question if you cannot understand. Now I will teach you along the way. So I have actually, in fact, covered everything here in this outline. All the normative theory here I already covered. Those I did not cover, for example, ethical parochialism, not important. Uh, Individual relativism, not important. Don't have to study it. You don't have to know that. Okay, so you just have to know utilitarianism, acts or rule is the same. I mean, just focus on act. Uh, and ethical egoism, Kantian ethics, prima facie duty, virtue ethics. These are absolute form to determine what is right and wrong. And then you learn about Kohlberg's theory. This you have to use this for your group video presentation. And then you learn about distributive justice, which we did just this week. So in fact, I've covered everything inside this chart here, except for the two that is not relevant to you, which we have debunked. Debunked. Okay. Any more question, guys? Post me a question here, so I can see. If no question, if you don't have any question, then we will call it a day. Do you have any question? If you have any issue, please WhatsApp me. Just give me some time to respond to you. If I didn't respond to you in 24 hours, it means that your message has gone somewhere down my list, meaning I have a lot of messages coming in. So if you don't get a message from me in 24 hours, it means that I may have overlooked your message because I have too many things coming in. Then you can WhatsApp me again, or you can always email me. I have no issue with answering email. If you notice carefully, almost every lesson I would have given you my contact number and my WhatsApp number. You'll be surprised, even at the end of the semester, the student will say, "Sir, where is your contact number? What is your email address?" the students still they still don't know. Cannot be, because it's everywhere. I put on my Padlet, I put on my eLearn, I put on my subject overview document, coursework document, and almost all the lectures and tutorial I would have given you my contact, so you can contact me anytime. Don't last minute come and ask me what is your contact number. Okay, guys, thank you very much. I will see you again next week for our tutorial, and then subsequent week for our lecture. The smoking article for the theories question can recap from your live session. Yeah, right now go and take a look at this week live session, which was recorded. Okay, so I have given to you on my Padlet all the necessary document that you need to study to prepare yourself for this subject. For example, your individual assignment. I given you two examples. One example based on Article 3, one example based on Article 9. And I said that the group video presentation is coming. How to do it is coming soon. And all the lecture until lecture 4 I've covered. And for tutorial session, we are now at week 4. So week 2, week 3, week 4 I've covered. So next week is week 5. We will do our sweatshop and inhumane human practice. The argument by the two authors is yes. And then the counter argument, our sweatshop and humane business practice. No, it is not unhumane. And why? You'll be surprised. There are quite equally strong argument both sides. You Can you see I always give you argument for and against so that you can make a decision on your own. Okay, so for week 5, week 6 tutorial, I will be posting more video here eventually. Okay, for lecture session, we are now uh, at week 4, isn't it? Next week I say week 4 we did the distributive justice. So week 5 lecture, I said this session you look at. Can you see here? Week 3 tutorial and week 4 tutorial. Okay, so there's no lecture for next week, but on week 6 we will do bribery. Okay, we will do bribery. Okay, thank you guys. See you again for next week's tutorial. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You may leave now. I will end the streaming for YouTube Live. I will end the streaming for YouTube Live. Thank you. Thank you, Alice.